When the world has laid you low, don't despair. I don't know. Try to have a little hope. Hope for a better future. Hope for a greener pasture. You know, you can't get stuff right now. It's impossible to get Pokemon. It's hard to get a lot of Magic the Gathering. Other card games are drying up. Some board games are going out of print. Some board game companies are going out of business. Prices are on the rise. Tariffs everywhere. Can't collect how you used to collect. Can't invest how you used to invest. Can't play how you used to play. And it seems like it's always going to be like this. But it's not. Things change. Things go back to the way they were. And then they go back to the way they were. And then they go back to the way they were. So it was like this at the time, a few years ago. And then a few years before that. And a few years before that. And it was a different way a few years before that. And a few years before that. And this market is crazy bullish, as any of the, investment channels will be telling you. Most of them are under the impression that this is going to go on for a very long time. I'm not certain of that, but then again, I'm not certain that it's not. And no one should take, advice that leads them to spending money in a certain way that they don't have. So if you don't have money to spend in a certain way and you can't afford to take risks, don't take any risks. Just wait it out. There's a friend of mine watched Noble House the other day. So this game up here is based on a James Clavell novel, and they did a mini-series in the 80s, which is what we called, what you have regular television now with 8 episodes. But back then, 8 episodes was just a mini-series, because usually you had 20 to 30 episodes a year. And even earlier in TV, I think it was up to 50 for some TV shows. Anyway, nowadays, you have basically miniseries. And the Noble House miniseries basically covers most of the novel. The novel's better. The audiobook is pretty great. And in it, you have Malcolm Strun, the leader of the Noble House. And it was started by Dirk Strun, who many regarded as a pirate, an opium smuggler. And they rose in the 1800s and eventually became the largest corporation, or the most important corporation in Hong Kong. And by the 80s, they still have many enemies. And at this point, their enemies smell blood. Their enemies think that they can take down the Noble House, replace the Noble House, or become the Noble House, depending on which enemy you're talking about. And throughout the movie, Pierce Brosnan as Malcolm Strun basically does all these things, these little machinations, to try and save his company. Now, my friend was upset that because the way the movie ends, nothing that he did mattered. It's what happened at the end of the movie that was not in his control that saved the company. Okay? But also, throughout the movie, they talk about this concept of Joss. And in it, it's considered similar to luck, but also there's some patience involved, and there's some, fate involved. And you're not supposed to press fate. You're supposed to go with the flow and follow your fate, and maybe try to take advantage of situations as they come along. So the point of the movie isn't that Malcolm Strun is brilliant and can outsmart all of his enemies and save the Noble House with a bunch of these little sneaky things that he did. Really, what he was doing was delaying, because the conditions of the market that he was in were unfavorable for his company, and the company would be destroyed. But the conditions in another point in time might not be so unfavorable. So all he had to do was delay until he could get to a different set of market conditions, at which point his company's safe. Now, of course, the end of the movie is very elaborate, and the situation that occurs is a natural disaster, partly man-made, that it's an act of God, basically, a Deus Ex Machina. But I guess we kind of look down on the idea of Deus Ex Machina these days, and we kind of call them Deus Ex Machinas, whether they are or not. When in reality, lots of things happen lots of the time. So Malcolm Strone recognizes this, that anything can happen on a day-to-day basis. And as long as you can move forward and continue to exist until you get to a point where something happens and the world changes and the market shifts and now you win. And that's kind of like what is happening now. You have a certain desire for a certain product and it's too expensive, too hard to get. People are being ripped off, and the price that you pay now could be lower months from now, or it could be higher months from now, and you can't make the right decisions, right? So a lot of the time, the best decision is to do nothing, or to delay, or to wait it out. Figure out what market conditions you think are favorable, plan for that, and wait for those market conditions to come along. And there's this idea, I guess, out there that, that you can't ignore your problems. Your problems won't go away. And I watch quite a bit of Asmongold, and in a lot of his earlier videos, he does talk about how he does ignore problems and they do go away. And it happens. That happens. Just as much as doing something about it right away and solving the problem at the very beginning can be an excellent strategy. But sometimes doing nothing about it and waiting to see how things progress and finding a better point to tackle the problem with a better set of conditions, with more tools at your disposal, can be the better option. And only you can really figure that out. And so when you're watching different YouTubers, regardless of what, market segment they are, whether they're investors, collectors, or players, and they're talking about what the market is like, what it was like, and what it's going to be, you got to take your own ideas and your memory of what has happened before and any information you've had from what has happened before, and figure out, whether or not you can believe what they're saying. And if you're going to take an action based on what someone is saying, then you got to be fairly certain they're right. And if you're not certain they're right, then you got to wait until you are certain they're right, or until market conditions change. Anyway, so that is just a PSA for don't make any rash decisions. Don't worry about what the craziness of the prices, of the lack of supply, and your inability to get the thing that you love. At some point in the future, you'll be able to. And it's funny because a lot of store owners have said, basically since this bull run began, that they really miss the days when they couldn't sell Pokemon or Magic, and it was difficult, and because at least they could get what they ordered, and they could find a way to move it, right? They could put some effort into breaking down the product and finding another way to sell it, or dumping it, or moving it around and do. Basically, they could find ways to sell it, and it was hard. It was more work, but partly I think it feels more honest to them, and partly because having an empty shelf is one of the worst things for a store owner. So you'd rather have full shelves even if nobody's buying, I guess. And I can understand where that's coming from. So basically, almost everybody is kind of done with this bull market. And it's going to probably go on until people are more than done with the bull market, until they're afraid of the market. And right now they're not afraid of the market. They're just annoyed with the market. So wait until you smell fear, and then wait a little bit more, and then you'll be able to get what you want. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Have a good day.